Hey guys, it's me, Crystal. So I have my January reading wrap up and my February TBR today. And so let's just get into the video, okay? So first, oh my gosh, these are the books that I had on my January TBR. And then these are the physical books that I read, plus I listened to two audiobooks, which was Alice in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass. So these are the books that I did not get to that were on the TBR. I didn't get to them. Obviously, I knew I wasn't going to get to everything. And then these are the books that were on the TBR that I DNF'd, and I already talked about this one. So I will just, before I get into the wrap up, I'll just very briefly talk about why I DNF'd these two. So The Countess by Rebecca Johns. This is historical novelization of Elizabeth Bathory, also known as the Blood Countess. I gave it like 25 pages. It was super dry and boring, and it just was hurting my brain, so I quit. And then after 3 months of sloshing through Winter Spell by Claire Legrand, I decided to just go ahead and DNF it. I'm like, if I'm still not in the mood for this story after 3 months, then I don't want to read it. And I feel like a brick had been lifted off of my back, so I feel so much better. And the thing is like, this is a YA fantasy retelling of the Nutcracker, and it is very action-packed. There really isn't anything wrong with this book other than it's just really not interesting to me. It's like a kind of a portal fantasy, and we get to the other world and characters are being introduced, and I'm just like, I don't care. I continued reading very slowly for like another couple of weeks, and then I was talking to my sister about it, and she's like, why are you still reading that book? And I'm like, I don't know. So I quit. Yeah, so I think I quit, what is it, about page 170, very end of page 173, very top of 174. I did flip to the end because like I have a feeling I know how this is going to end, so I wanted to see if I was right, and I was. Not that there's anything wrong with the ending, it's just I already knew how the book was going to end. There was no point in me forcing myself to read all the details and everything. So, and yes, to the books I did not get to, they are going to go into a previous TBR jar. I changed up the way I'm going to do my TBRs, like just a tiny bit, which I'll talk about more when I get to that part of the video. But yeah, so those 3 books, I do still want to read them, but I'm going to go ahead and move on and put them in the previous TBR jar. Okay, so I'm going to talk about these books in the order that I read them so I can keep myself on track. And the first book I read this year was, unfortunately, The Time Weaver by Shauna Abe. I hated this book. It is a historical fantasy romance with dragons. I think in my notes, I called it tacky dragon wallpaper. And I knew I was going to like this book about 30 pages in, and I forced myself to read it, because I was like, the concept was so interesting, and I just didn't like it. I didn't think it was well done. I'm like, how do you take a time hopper and a dragon, fantasy romance and make it boring? But congratulations. Yeah, I have in my notes, I said this was convoluted. I didn't have a connection to anyone. There were too many points of views. It was just hard pass. And I wish I quit this book. But anyway, also because I do want to give star ratings for everything, I gave this 2 stars. Not sure it deserves 2 stars, but I finished it, so it gets 2 stars. And then yes, the next book I finished was Alice in Wonderland. I listened to the audiobook. I thought the narration was freaking fantastic. The story is a little nonsensical because it kind of flows like a dream. So it's kind of like you're kind of being jerked from one scene to the next. But there is a transition. There's a very smooth transition. So I didn't feel like I was being jerked around, but you kind of are being jerked around. It's like she goes into the woods, and then there's a house, and then like she leaves the house, and then like there's something else. And I thought it was really fun, and it was funny. Like, it actually made me laugh out loud. And yeah, and I haven't read this book in a long time, so I was really happy to listen to it. In the audiobook, I did follow along in the book a few times, and I do feel like there is a few things missing. Not like big chunks of the book. It just seems like the narrator like kind of glossed over a sentence or a word or three every now and then. Not in a way that anything that the story didn't make sense. It was just like he didn't see that sentence and he just skipped it. And it's a little weird, and I had the same issue with Alice Through the Looking Glass. Only in this one, he skipped an entire poem, and I could feel it because it's like, again, like Through the Looking Glass is kind of like Alice in Wonderland. You're kind of transitioning from one scene to the next with no explanation or very little explanation. And again, it's done in a way that it totally makes sense and it does feel like a dream. And so I was able to, very easily keep up with the story hopping around. But I kind of don't understand why like things were missing. I didn't notice like little words here and there missing or like word changes like I did in Alice in Wonderland. But then like I actually went and picked the book up because I could tell that something was missing because we didn't have that transition. Like we didn't have Alice opening the door and going into a room. It was just all of a sudden she was in this room and I'm like, oh my gosh, how did you get there? And so I went and picked up the book, and I don't know what happened or how that happened or why that happens. But anyway, so that's why I gave both of these audiobooks 4 stars, just because while I thought the narrator did a really good job, there were some things missing for some reason. So anyway, so I actually finished 3 books in between the Alice in Wonderland audiobook and the Through the Looking Glass audiobook. So the next book I finished was Death Note Volume 1. This was 5 stars. This is freaking fantastic. It's like, yes, it's about this kid named Light, and he finds this death note, and a death note is a notebook that belongs to a god of death, and whosever name you write in the book, they die. And so this particular notebook belongs to Ryuk, and Ryuk dropped it on purpose because he's bored and he thinks humans are interesting and will do something interesting to, stave off his boredom. And he is correct, and there's a lot going on, and it's a lot there's a lot more depth than I thought it was going to have. And then, of course, like the police get involved, and the National Police Agency, which is the Japanese FBI equivalent. And like the NPA is involved, and it's just like, oh my gosh, it's so crazy. And there's like all of these twists, and like just when I think that like Light's back is against the wall, I'm like, oh no, how's he gonna get out of this? Like something crazy happens, and it was really, really good. It's like Light and this other guy who's around his age, he just goes by L. Like they were both like geniuses, and so it's like there's like this battle of the wits going on, and it's like who's gonna win, like who's smarter or whatever. Anyway, it was really, really good. So then I only had volume 1, so I actually had to go out and pick up volume 2 because I had to start immediately, and I also thought volume 2 was fantastic. Also gave this 5 stars. The stakes get even higher, and I'm just like, this is so crazy. And also, yes, let's take a look at our artwork, something that's not spoilery. But yeah, we have this fantastic artwork, and oh my gosh, I just love this. I love this so much. But I read another book before I finished volume 3, but since I have these stacked this way, also read volume 3 of Death Note this month. I gave this 4 stars. I spent the first, there are 2 volumes in every one of these volumes, so I think it was just volume 5 that I was kind of on the fence about, but it kind of dragged like my excitement down a lot. And even though like this ended very, very exciting, and like things were starting to come together and I was getting like really excited again, it's like L like has started to go too far. He started to go too far. I don't really like his methods. I'm pretty sure L is a terrible person. It's like he is willing to win at like all costs. And I'm like, I get that you think Kira, like the person who's killing off these criminals is known in the media as Kira, which is like an angel of death. And just like Elle just went way too far. It went too far, and my suspension of disbelief like completely crumbled because I was like, I'm having a hard time reconciling his actions with something that would float in the real world. And so anyway, in volume 6, which is the second half of this book, I was starting to build back up again, so I ended it with, the bare bones of my suspension of disbelief back in place. So yeah, so I gave this 4 stars, but I still really liked it, but now I'm like worried about where the series is going. And the next book I read this month was Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. I gave this 5 stars. Oh, that was freaking fantastic. This book made me cry. I cried like 3 times. Now, one of those times, it wasn't necessarily the book that was making me cry. It was something that Leigh Bardugo was doing as an author that was making me cry. And because I was like a little jealous, but also just like, it was so good. It was so good. Like this is right up my alley. It's right up my alley. It's dark. It was cold. It was really good. It was hopeful, which was nice. Also, I love Maul so much. I love Maul so much. And part of it is not because Maul is so great. It's because like one of the tropes I actually really like in books is this like friends, and this a friendship that develops into like true love or whatever. It's so cheesy. I just really, really love it. And I'm always shipping the friends in books with romantical subplots in them. So anyway. Also, who's shipping Alina with the Darkling? Okay, look, if you read this book, then you know, and if you haven't, I'm not going to spoil it, but there's this moment at the end, okay? There's this moment at the end. You know what this means if you read the book. I was like, the Darkling has gone too far. He has gone too far. I went to this book knowing significant plot points for the next 2 books, and I was still falling for stuff. I was still like, oh, the Darkling, he's actually not that bad, And it's just like, Krystal, what is wrong with you? So I love Leigh Bardugo's writing. I think this is fantastic. So, but yeah, so if you don't know what this book is about, it's about this girl. She is a cartographer in the army. I think maybe the first army, but there's also like a second army that's full of like Gresher soldiers, which are soldiers who have like, I think they're called Masters of the Small Science, but basically they're like soldiers with powers and abilities, and they're able to manipulate the world around them and whatnot. And Alina turns out to be Grisha. It was very exciting. I thought it was very exciting. I mean, I knew how her power came out when I went into this book, and because I'm pretty sure it's in the blurb. But anyway, it was still really exciting. They go into the Shatterfold, which is just this dark mass that's just like spreading throughout the countryside, and it's splitting up this one kingdom into 2 parts. And they're in the Shatterfold, and these monsters come for them, and she's about to die, and Maul is about to die, and then this light just bursts out of her, and it turns out she's a sun summoner, and the Darkling has been looking for a sun summoner. The Darkling, he had to grow on me, because when I first saw him, I'm like, oh, he is really young, which is something Alina's like, oh, he does look really young, because he's supposed to be over 100, or older, and you're just like, oh, but, oh my gosh, he grew on me as a villain, not as a love interest. I do not like the Darkling as a love interest, but as a villain, he really grew on me a lot. So anyway, obviously I want to continue the series. Anyway, I'm done. So the last book I read this month was The Vatican Princess by C.W. Goitner. This is a fictionalized story about Lucrezia Borgia. And she was one of the children of Pope Alexander VI. Whose non-pope name was Rodrigo Borgia. And I give this 5 stars. There was no reason not to give it 5 stars. It was very well written, and it was like dramatic, and the pacing was amazing because it covers a period of almost 8 years. And then he has like an afterword where he wraps up everything and like when people died and how and stuff like that. And I'm just like, this was so sad. This book broke my heart. Like, there are times I almost cried. I didn't cry, but I almost cried a few times. I'm sitting here reading this book, and I'm just like, oh my God. Like, I thought he did a really good job of balancing like fact with like speculation and like, the myths surrounding, and the rumors surrounding, things that may or may not have happened. I thought his interpretation was it was well done. It was well done. He filled in, the a lot of, because we don't know what happened behind the scenes. Like, we only know, the things that we know. Like, these people died this year. They were buried in these places. Like, he became Pope and this is how he died and blah, 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 blah. And it's just like, there are things we know, but I thought he did a really good job of like going behind the scenes and filling out all those things that we don't know in a way that was like believable and consistent. And you get to see Lucrezia like grow up, and she's like, when the story starts, she's 12, almost 13, and her dad has just been elected Pope Alexander VI. And she's like very innocent, and she loves her dad and trusts him so much, and she trusts Cesare, one of her older brothers, so much. And oh my gosh, these people are monsters. And I'm just like, anyway, I thought this was really well done and really good. And yeah, so historical fiction, very good. Yeah. So you think that out of 4 books that I read, I gave 1 2-star, like 3 4-stars, and 4 5-stars. You think it would have been difficult for me to choose a favorite read of the month? It was not. I picked Shadow and Bone. Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. Only because like I thought it was gonna be like a tie between like Death Notes Volume 1. But when I got to Volume 3, and I was just kind of like, oh my gosh, I think Light is insane. Like, I understand like why he's insane, but I just thought he was going too far, and it was really bothering me. And like I said, my excitement was watered down quite a bit, and I had to build it back up again. So it ended up being, by a landslide, Shadow and Bone. It's it's exactly the kind of book that I like. It's fun, and there's blood, and it's just really good. And the action scenes are not long at all. There's quite a few of them, but they're very short. And so when they would come up, I knew it wasn't going to go on for pages and pages. And so I was like excited to see how they were going to get out this bind or whatever. It was so good. All right, all right, so let's get on to the TBR. All right, so what I'm going to do is I broke down and I went to Hobby Lobby and I bought some more jars, because I'm like, if I have to fold up all these pieces of paper every single month, I'm going to be really mad. Also, I decided that I didn't want to like have a one and done kind of theme, because I'm like, there are a lot of books in some of these themes, and I was like, I could potentially do this for a few years. Or longer to help me get through my TBR. And so I decided that instead of throwing all the previous TBR books in a basket, I wanted to be able to reuse themes. So every single theme now has its own jar. All the pieces of paper are already folded. That will save me some time. So everything that I didn't get to is now gonna go in here. And now everything is already organized. And that's just so great. So what I'm going to do is, depending on the theme I'm going to pick 2 or 3 themes out of the theme jar every month, and then reuse them. And then I will pick books at random based on those themes. So let's go. I'm excited this month. Last month I was kind of nervous, but now that it's done, and I know that, there's going to be, I'll do this again, a book that's been on my shelf forever. So I'm just going to pick one, okay? Because that was last month's theme. But yeah, this way I can reuse themes, and there's not so much pressure for the books that I pick, because it's like, I can try again at another month. And this says anything but fantasy or paranormal. And let's pick one more. Oh, I picked 2. Okay, let's pick this one. What is this? Binge an entire series. Oh no. Also, what I decided to do was, I used to have a reread theme, and so I took that out because I only had a few rereads and all of them could fit into another category. So I just did that, and then what was going to be my rereads jar just became my previous TBR jar, so I don't have to use the basket and it'll be more contained this way, and I'm a little clumsy, so there's a high likelihood that these are going to fall over at some point. Okay, so I think I'm going to pick one from the previous month's category, which was this one, a book that's been on my shelf forever. Then I'm going to pick one from binge an entire series. This was one of the themes that I was the most worried about, because I'm like, if I have an entire month while all I'm reading the series, I think I'm going to be in a bad mood. So, and then I will pick, let's say 3 books from the Anything But Fantasy or Paranormal. And then I already have 3 books I want to put on February's TBR. So potentially this will give me 10 books for February's TBR, assuming I pick out a series that has 3 books in it. And most months I wanted to pick an ebook, but I already picked an ebook already, and it's not going on the TBR because I'm listening to it on audiobook, but I want the option to switch to the ebook. So let's draw. Let's do this one first, since I'm just drawing one. Of course, these are stuffed in here pretty bad. So let's just pick this one. Oh my gosh, A Discovery of Witches. Oh, I've been wanting to read that for a while. Oh, that's good. Okay, so then we're gonna pick a series. I don't have a ton of series because I just about never finished them, but oh, I touched Teasel's paper. I hope I like this one. Oh, A Sea Witch and Sea Witch Rising. Okay, I do want to read that. Okay. This is really good so far. Okay, now I'm going to pick 3 from this jar. And then I will get all the books, and then that'll be it. I mean, talk about them. I picked out 2, so I'm just going to go with these 2. The Wives. I just got this book. Interesting. Okay. And then I have Illuminae. Okay. I'm not mad about that. Okay, let me dig at the bottom, because these are not mixed very well. What is this? The Vatican Press. I just read that. It's funny. There are going to be some duplicates as I go through these, because I did put some of these books in a couple of categories. But yeah, I just read that. So. I knew that was going to happen. I just didn't know it was going to happen so soon. City of Girls. Okay. I do want to read, obviously I want to read all of these books, but okay. So we get the books, and then we'll talk about them, and yeah. Right, so what I'm going to do for February is I'm going to put all 3 of the themes in this section, and February's theme is Masquerade, which is one of my favorite ones. So this is what I'm going to be looking at on my TBR page, and then wrap-up page. And then, favorite read of the month. Also, for the record, I did get my reading journal reprinted at Office Depot, because that other paper, and that's what I guess I get for being a little cheap or whatever, but it was just bleeding through, and I'm like, this is not going to work if all year I have to worry about bleeding. And as you can see, I don't have to worry about that with these. Nothing's bleeding through, so that is very, very good. And so I'm very happy. Everything is fine. Okay, so I have my books stacked in front of me, and I forgot at the last minute that this is one of the books that I was going to put on my February TBR. So let's talk about this one first. We have Atomic Habits, and my sister thinks that I should read this, so I'm going to read this. And it's a nonfiction book about building habits, tiny changes, remarkable results. We'll see how this goes. But anyway, it's by James Clear. I also really like this book. It's a lot prettier than I thought it was going to be. And then we have a duology, Sea Witch and Sea Witch Rising by Sarah Henning. And I know this book is kind of like a Little Mermaid retelling, kind of, where like the main character is like the Ursula character or something. That's all I know. And I know this one, I think the Ariel character is also supposed to be in here. I'm a little afraid that Ursula is going to not be as evil as I would like her to be, but maybe I'll really like this interpretation. These are kind of short. I should be able to read both of these, actually. Yeah, okay. But yeah, just YA fantasy, I think. Mermaids or fantasy. And then I'm going to start reading, well, I already started reading. I'm going to read Death Note Volume 4 and probably also Volume 5. So, you know, manga horror. And then I wanted to read book 2 of Shadow and Bone trilogy, so Siege and Storm by Leigh Bardugo. Very excited about this, but I want to read it towards the end of the month. So I don't like, if for some reason I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to read book 3 now, then, you know, it won't get in the way of the rest of my TBR. And then I really want to read The Wicked Saints by Emily A. Duncan. So I decided to put this on March's TBR because book 3 is coming out in April. And I want to read the book 1 before that book comes out because I know myself. And if I haven't read this book, I'll just go ahead and buy it to finish the series. So this is YA fantasy. Somebody says it's kind of like if you want something that's like Nevernight. If you like the bloodiness of Nevernight and you ship Alina with the Darkling and Shatter and Bone. That is what I heard someone say. And so I'm like, I mean, having not read any one of those books, it still sounded exciting. So I want to read this. Also, there's blood on the cover. And she said this was really bloody because there's like blood magic. And so it's about this girl and she can like communicate with the gods. And if the gods are in the mood, then they're like grant her some abilities that she can use temporarily. And so people are like really scared of her. That's all I know. And that's not even a lot. And that's not really enough either. This cover is shiny. The title is shiny. Anyway, I just think this sounds really interesting. So I want to read it. But also, look at this tagline. Let them fear her. Like our main character who might be a little like morally bankrupt. I'm hoping. It's exciting for me. And then the other books I picked, City of Girls by Elizabeth Gilbert. This is about this girl and she goes to stay with, I think, her aunt. She goes to stay with some family member, I don't remember. And this family member tells her life story about growing up in like the theater world. And it sounds interesting. So, and then I picked up The Wives by Taryn Fisher. And this is a adult thriller. And it's about this woman and she's married to this guy who has a couple other wives. And she's okay with this setup, with him only spending, I think, like 1 day out of the week with her. And then he splits the rest of his time with his other wives. He's like, he tells her about his other wives, but she's like not allowed to contact them. But of course she does. And it's like a thriller and it's like really short. And normally I wouldn't read a book like this. But I just thought it sounded really interesting. It sounded like a Lifetime movie, which I used to love back in the day. And then we have Illuminae. It's pretty thick, but like I said in my book haul when I got it, it looks like this all the way through. Like, I'm living with this format so much. So this is by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. And I was never going to read this book because it didn't sound interesting. But again, somebody was complaining about having to hold this book upside down at one point to read some of the pages. And so I was like, I am so here for that. So this is sci-fi. That's all I know. I literally don't know what this book is about at all. So I guess I'll find out. I'm really looking forward to this. So then this last book, A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. This is an adult paranormal, but a lot of people are saying it's kind of like if you want like Twilight, but with adult characters. And I had this book for a while, probably as soon as it came out, and it's just been sitting on my shelf, and I have not watched the show because I haven't read the book yet. So this is good because it'll give me a show to watch because I tend to binge stuff and then I don't know what to watch. So that's all I know about this book. I don't know the plot other than the main character is a witch and there's a vampire involved at some point and it's modern day, and that's all I know. I knew more when I bought the book. So now I just gotta figure out what I'm going to read first. I mean, obviously I'm already reading Death Note Volume 4, but I like to read a couple books at a time so that there's not any pressure on any one particular book to entertain me. I'm very excited. This is a good TBR, I think. I'm gonna try to lift all these books up. They're really heavy. So this is my February. Is this all of them? I can't see. So this is my this is my February TBR, and yeah. Okay, yeah, so that's all for this video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Have a great week, and have a great February. Bye.